Also, we like it when that happens. Some things are set up right. Hello, everyone. It's like you see the participants like track down. So it's like moving from the little waiting room into the Zoom room. Imagining everyone with their drink of choice. Mine is water. And I thought sometimes I ask folks to share what they're reading as we get started. But this time, in celebration of the Edgar Awards coming up, I'm going to put the awards list in the chat if you all haven't seen it to take a look and see if there are any of those books that you're reading now or that you recommend or an author that is a fan of yours. So I'll put those there. Or you can just talk about what you're reading. I always like to hear that. People also share where they're coming from. Totally fine. But it's great to get reading recommendations. And yes, thank you, thank you, thank you, Richard. You have shown me that the chat is working, which I'm very grateful for. And thank you for the reading recs. So I'll let people keep doing that, and then we'll get started in just a second. Um, okay, great. Sorry, I'm doing a little box arranging. Okay, I think we're good. All right. Ruth Francis, I'm also from Iowa, so thinking of you in the chat. Great. Okay. Hello, everyone. I'm Katie Freeman, and on behalf of Mystery Writers of America, welcome to MWA University 2026. If you haven't had a chance to join past sessions, you can find links to watch on the website under the Education tab and keep an eye there for upcoming ones as well. Today, we're going to be talking about killer love letters and how to match with the perfect agent and editor for your work with two superb guests, Joe Brosnan and Liza Fleissig, who I'll introduce in a moment. And you may see the tail of my cat, who has come to join us as well. Feel free to drop your questions in the Q&A box at any time, and we'll turn to them in about half an hour. You can put them in the chat too, the Q&A box if you can find it. It's great just so I can sort of have them all together. And now to introduce Joe. Joe is a senior editor at Grove Atlantic, where he oversees the Atlantic Crime imprint. Prior to that, he was an editor and senior marketing manager at St. Martin's Press, Minotaur Books, and also the site manager for Criminal Element for nearly a decade. He lives in New York City, and he just filled out a writer's dossier on the website recently that said last seen at a writing conference, probably on a panel. That felt very appropriate. And I also just wanted to say that I just started, speaking of reading recommendations, I just started a book that Joe edited and is thanked very beautifully in the end. This is a debut novel. Maybe we'll talk about what the query letter looked like for that one. Liza, with her business partner Ginger Harris Johnson, opened the Liza Royce Associates LRA in early 2011. So coming up on 15 years. A cross-platform company providing development and strategic career management for clients in all media. Their goal is to represent clients in every stage of their careers, from the most established to those honing their craft. Both former partners in New York City-based litigation law firms, Liza and Ginger bring a combined 50 years of negotiating experience to the field. This background, along with connections rooted in film, television, and publishing, allow them to focus and build on a referral-based clientele, providing bespoke services on a multi-dimensional level. All the different dimensions out there. So we're talking about query letters tonight. I'm going to share everyone's, both of their websites and a couple of other things in the chat. But I thought that we could first get started with some definitions. And I thought we'd just start real simple. What is a query letter? I know you guys are going to jump all over it. You're ready to go. Joe, I feel like you're ready.
Sure. Yeah, let's do it. Query letters. So for me, my understanding of them, how I think of them are what I receive from an agent that positions the submission, what I'm about to read. We'll get into, I think, a lot of what makes successful query letters as we talk today, but in short, I think they should be clear on the shorter side. They should really succinctly tell you what you're about to read, ideally give you a few comps, and introduce the author.
I'm going to actually ask for an extended. I'm going to put an asterisk and ask for a definition about what comp titles are. And then Liza, I'm going to turn to you.
Yeah, so comp titles, well, I also would like to talk about that quite a bit, because I think they're very important. But there are two different kinds, two different camps for comps. Say that five times fast. The first one are sales comps. These are books that have been published in the last handful of years that you think would sit next to your book, like on an end cap display. If you like this, you'll like that at a bookstore kind of thing. Um, Ideally, you're trying to find a book that it doesn't need to be like the exact same setting, the exact same type of protagonist, but something that feels similar. And ideally, you want to avoid the big all-star writers out there, the people who are so recognizable by their name alone that like they haven't had to worry about their sales track in decades. Those are not helpful, like for us, because it's so lofty to say that you might sell like them that we just don't think that is feasible. So you're better off trying to find newer voices, people who have really succeeded at kind of fighting their way into the marketplace in the last few years, because I think that shows that you kind of have your finger on the pulse of what's popular right now, what's working right now. Um, and we can talk later about how to maybe find comps, because I think there are some good ideas out there. And then the other sort of comp is more of like your fun, playful comps. These can be TV shows or movies or well-known books that have a unique thing about them that you think your books has similarly. Um, so those are, I think those are the where you should be having fun, and then your serious, your business comp should be the ones that are recent books.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. I felt I just learned something also. Liza, how do you think about a query letter, what it is and what it does?
So I'm going to give a shout out to the podcast, The Shit About Writing, because they talk about the book, the hook, and the cook, right? And the book is what's the book? That's a quick thing, right? What's the hook? What makes your book stand out a little bit? What makes it a little different? And the cook, right? Who's cooking? Tell me a little about yourself. I do think in today's current marketplace, you can't get around needing some type of platform. And I don't mean you have to be Beyonce or you don't have to be Oprah, but you do need to show engagement in the community. An editor wants to know that you are, you know, meeting other authors, you're going to events, you don't have to, somebody asked me, well, doesn't that mean I need a lot of money because I have to go to all these things? No, you can go to your local library, right? And pick out a book and say, reading this book, loving it, right? You just want to show that you are a little business savvy as far as the industry, because as much as this is a creative process, and yes, we care about the writing, but the writing at this point is honestly the lowest part of the bar, right? Because anybody we're going to represent and send to an editor, presumably it's good writing, right? Like we're not sending Joe a piece of something that's not so good, right? So if I'm sending something to Joe, it's already a good book. What I want to show them is there's citizenship here. And I mean that by community here, right? This is somebody who is engaged. This is somebody who has done their homework. Somebody who's been around the block, who's supporting other authors. That's part of your overall package, and I think that's really important to let an agent know that up front, because if you could be a great writer, but I have a lot of queries that I get, like 50 to 100 a day on an average. And there, there are a lot of books I think, wow, this could be great, but this person isn't ready for an agent. It's obvious from the query, they're just not ready for an agent. And it's not to say that your book couldn't be great, but if you're not really ready at that level, I'm not going to be able to sell you. Right. And so there's something Joe needs to bring back to his people to explain why, of the 1 to 3 or 4 books he might buy a year, why he's buying that book instead of another book. Thank you for nodding, Joe, because nobody believes me when I say to them they're only buying like 1 to 3 books a year, maybe. It's hard. And they're like, oh, that's not true. They're buying look how many, there are a bazillion books. I'm like, well, there's a lot of books coming out from a lot of different places. But Joe is not buying 10 books in a year. That I can guarantee without looking on his list right now.
Spot on, I think, on everything. In terms of what I'm buying, yeah, I mean it is 1 to 4 books maybe. It's not that I'm publishing 1 to 4. I'm publishing 12 myself and 24 on our list, but a lot of our authors are, we keep publishing them. We're a house that likes to invest in our town. So it's hard to get in, but it's, you know, somewhere we like to keep people and keep committing to the career. So yeah, that bar to clear is really high, and doing things like having shown that you're investing into your brand is really important. I do think I want to say that the bar isn't impossibly high, especially for someone who's a debut author trying to break in. I'm not this is fiction. It's different in nonfiction, but for fiction, I don't need thousands of followers, a huge subscriber list, like viral posts. I need someone who's willing to build a newsletter, who wants to, work, like have a website, claim their profiles on social media and post fairly often, connect with writers in the same space, go to virtual events, network, do those sorts of things. And nothing I've just said requires like a lot of money or any money. It's buying into the system. When I was a marketer, um, I worked with authors who I had no control over the books I got to work on, right? They were assigned to me by the, marketing bosses and sales bosses and whatever. And I worked with authors who were like, I don't do marketing. I don't do social media. My job's to write the book. And I like, you're tying a hand behind your back before we even start the process. And so I'm glad I got to work in marketing to start my career, because I found a whole bunch of red flags that exist for authors, and I avoid them when I now get to control what I buy and publish. Um, so yeah, I mean, I've bought a lot of debuts in the last few years, and none of them had giant platforms, but they were all authors who I had loved the book. And when I talked to them potentially about working together, I said, like, this is a, a non-starter for me. If you're not willing to do this, I'm not willing to work with you. And I mean, obviously, when I say something like that, they're like, no, no, we'll do it. But like, I believed him, and they are doing it. And, I had one author who he was like, it's not my thing. I don't like talking about myself. I don't know what's important enough for me to be saying and posting. And I was like, I get that. But you can be following people, you can be showing support, post a photo of the book you're reading, and like, don't even add any words if you don't want to. Fast forward a year, a couple years, a successful book, and he's posting selfies and videos and doing all these things because now
Got it.
he's feeling himself a little
Yeah.
bit. And like
Yeah.
it's so it's not expected to be done all at once. But going back to queries and the whole point of this, it's a giant red flag for me if I get a submission and it doesn't have like a link to an author's website or their socials or something to just show me who they are and what they're about at quick glance. Liza, you would be surprised how many people don't send that in their.
No, I'll tell you the best. So you'll like these. What is a real red flag is, um, I am going to be willing to do any book tour the publishers don't see you're going to spit out your drink right. Any book tour the publisher sends me on. I'm happy to travel wherever they send me. And once I have my book out, I'm going to make a website and I'm going to start my social media. Again, your book might be brilliant, but all you were telling me is you haven't done your homework in the industry. And I think a lot of people forget because it is such a creative industry, they forget the word industry. They just think creator or creative, right? And it is an industry. It is a business. There is a bottom line. There are P&L sheets. There's accounting. There are people you have to report to. And so you have to think of it from the business side as well. So just showing up like, hey, I have my MFA and I love writing, it's just not going to be enough traditionally. Now, look, there's lots of different paths, right? There's self-publishing is not a dirty word. I mean, take a look at some of the huge breakout successes. There are tons of POD houses, right? Print on demand. These are wholly acceptable, viable, successful paths if that's what you want to do. But then you don't need me, right? You don't need an agent and an editor in the traditional space because that's just not where you're trying to fit in. So I think it's just a really important takeaway. And we say it a lot, but I think it falls on deaf ears because it's hard to hear when you're a creative person, and I understand that, but you need to conform a little. There are always outliers, right? But if I'm sending something to Joe, I try to put it in the bell-shaped curve because that makes his job easier. And if you wind up being an outlier, all the better, right? But you need to kind of start a little bit in the bell-shaped curve just to help everyone else who's trying to lift you up be able to speak to you and say, speak on your behalf and say, but look, right? And if you don't give us the but look, it just makes it really hard for us to be able to do anything with it.
For sure. And so I'm lucky enough to be at one of the like more relaxed editor driven houses kind of out there in publishing. Grove Atlantic, isn't it's a private company. We don't have this giant marketing and like acquisitions board that we have to pass through. But I had that when I was at St. Martin's. It's a lot of
Sure.
people, a lot of cooks in that kitchen who are get a big say and they're not reading the book. Or maybe they are if you're lucky and you've done a good job pitching it as the editor. But like they're maybe reading a little bit, looking at the author, looking at the platform, looking at the potential of everything that isn't the book, because they're kind of assuming the editor has vouched for the quality of the writing. And so there's just keep that in mind. Like you're being judged from the get-go, and you really just want to be presenting the shiniest, cleanest package you can.
So let's talk about how you do that in a query letter. Like
Yeah.
where in the process does the query letter come? How long should it be? How do you present? Let's say everything you guys are talking about, having a website, being part of communities, being engaged in conversations about books. Like how do you present what you're offering in that query letter?
Um, so I think Liza and I might have different answers or like similar, but we both come to queries in a different way, right? Like the queries I'm seeing have been polished, right? They've been good enough to get that agent, and then that agent has put their magic touch on it and maybe translated it into the business like lingo that we all speak. And so I'm not seeing like really bad queries for the most part. I am seeing plenty that don't have all the information I kind of crave, um, or who are a little long-winded or whatnot. But for the most part, I think what you really need to be doing is almost reverse engineering the process, right? Imagine you never heard of you and you never heard of your book and someone was going to email you to get you excited about it. How would you do it? I try to like my advice is like if you were to try to convince your friend to watch a TV show, you wouldn't like belabor how many episodes and how long the runtime is. You wouldn't like talk about the like setting for that long unless it was a huge part of that story's identity. You would, lead with the most exciting thing, right? Like Breaking Bad, I just rewatched it and like you would go right into like Walter White, he's a uh, depressed science teacher who gets diagnosed with cancer and decides to start selling drugs to pay for his treatments, descending into like a criminal underworld, right? Like you would just that's exciting. I'm like, I want to know more about that. But if you were like, it's a 5-season drama set in New Mexico about this man, 44, Walter White, like I'm bored already. And I think we have a tendency to like really belabor the page counts, the settings, all these check boxes that kind of make up your book, but like you're losing the thing that makes it special or exciting. And test it on your partners, your friends, anyone, and like ask them if you've had people read on your behalf. Like how would you excite someone? What would be your elevator pitch? Really lead with that. You get one shot to get that email opened and read. And for me as an editor, like you get one shot for me to even like be willing to take a look. A bad query or an uninteresting one, I just pass on the spot a lot of the time.
Liza, do you have anything you'd like to add to that? Thinking about like
Yeah, see, I mean, I'm one level, I'm more direct with the author, right? So hopefully, thank you, Joe. If I send you something, hopefully it's usually pretty good for his eyes. But I think that, opening up a query to me is, I don't want bullshit, right? And there are times I'm like, oh, I see your author list of this one, this one, this one, this one, and this one, and I just love all of them. And so I want to be at at your agency. And I'm thinking, first of all, you're mentioning names that are completely not on the same, one's historical fiction, one's thriller, one's a picture book author. You're just throwing names, which shows you just looked at my website, which is, okay, you made an effort, but that's not really organic, right? It's not really genuine. And I don't need you to feel that you're, kissing my butt, right? If something really is like, oh, I met your author at an event and she said such great things about you and blah, 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 and here's my book, that's a real thing if you met them. But I don't need a list of who my authors are, right? I don't need a list of like, just like Stephen King. No. Even if you are, don't tell me. Be humble about it, right? Maybe I'll read and go, oh my gosh, this is like Stephen King, right? And I think that if you just can come in with a story that, like Joe said, you're excited to talk about, right? I want to feel your enthusiasm on the page, not about you, not like I'm the greatest thing and I'm this, I'm this. It's like I have this book, right? I'm really excited to tell you about my thriller, right? It's in the vein of blank. I know instantly now kind of where you're sending me, right? And I like all kinds of thrillers. So you don't have to worry about it. You're picking the right one. Pick the one that really is your book, right? And then tell me a little bit about it. It takes place, blah, 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 right? I don't mind word count. I think, like Joe said, there's a lot of pedigree information of that kind of stuff that's kind of boring. But I will tell you, if I see something that's 150,000 words, not for me, right? I'm not looking for, especially as a debut. It's a really hard lift for an editor with a debut. Just think about the extra time editing, the extra cost of production, the extra space you need for warehousing, the extra cost for shipping. Again, business side, the non-glamorous side, but still a reality. And there are some people that say it's really long, but every word is so important. They actually put that into query. That's a flag. So I think if you could just lead with, I'm excited to talk to you about X, and it's in the vein of Y. Here's the back jacket, right? Think about a book that you pick up, and on the back, there's always, a paragraph or two. Think about that. That tells me all I need to know. And then say a little about me, right? And tell me honestly who you are and what you've been doing. I don't need it to be three, pages long, and I don't need 100,000 followers, but I need to say, I've been studying for this craft for a while. I've been going to these conferences. I've met so and so. There are a few people like blank, blank, and blank who I know will support me when my book comes out. Just it. And if you don't have that, that's okay too, right? I can introduce you to authors. I can help you, but I need to know that. I need to know that that that's something that has to be done. So even if you said, look, where I live, it's hard for me to meet some authors. They don't all come, but I go to my library, I'm part of this online group, or something that shows me that you get it, even if you don't have the same kind of access, right? So it just shows me your head's in the right place and I can work with you.
So on that note, I'm gonna pull up a couple of questions that we've had. Margaret was asking, would being part of a writers group be seen as savvy and supportive if it's a private group? Does that, yeah, okay, great.
Absolutely.
And Ty had asked, I said, I'm a former marketer myself. Are agents and publishers open to seeing marketing plans from writers, like identifying market gaps in our query letter? And I'm going to pause on answers for that and say maybe within your answer you could talk about query letter versus proposal. Like, what is it that you're putting in a query letter and what might you be saving for a larger package about the book?
Yeah,
Um,
so
no, 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 go, Joe.
you sure? Sorry,
Yeah.
we're going at the same time. I think being a former marketer is a plus, right? I think that is an advantage that you have. And it's definitely worth highlighting that, like in your bio. Um, I don't know how much, like, I don't need a whole deck or presentation kind of at the point of submission. But if you have identified market gaps and you think that there is a reason this book has a chance to work because no one's done something quite this way, and you can explain it with data. I'm the marketer in me wants to know that. I don't know if every editor does, but I'd guarantee you every marketing meeting, like every marketing head who has to then listen to a pitch about potentially like having this book acquired would be interested in that. So I do think it's a positive. Um, Again, it just shows, going back to what we've been talking about, that you're someone who can kind of buy into the whole part of being an author that isn't the writing.
And Liza, for you about thinking about query versus proposal, should something like a marketing ideas be included?
I think to Joe's point, if somebody wants to tell me I've identified a marketing gap or I've already been in connection, I have one recently that said I'm actually part of a YPO, the Young Presidents Organization, People's Organization. I can't remember what it is, but and I have access to blank, blank, and blank of these people who are willing to whatever, right? So that was a great thing to know. But I wouldn't want a whole marketing proposal and a slideshow showing what they're going to do because first I still need, at the end of the day, the book, right? So I don't need the marketing proposal. I also wouldn't necessarily even send one to Joe. For example, I would maybe if he was liking the book and said, "Hey, I'm thinking about getting some stuff together. I like the book. I want to get some second reads." I could say, "Hey, great. Let me also just tell you some other things we're thinking of as a way to potentially market the book and some people he or she has already been in touch with." But he doesn't really need that up front. Knowing the person has some marketing connections will help, but he doesn't need to be overloaded with information because if he reads it and says, "Hey, I really like it, but it's not right for our list," or whatever, the other stuff doesn't matter, right? So I would spend much more time doing what you say you're going to do in that proposal, right? Meeting the people or getting the contacts or setting things up, than worrying about spending any time creating the proposal, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I will say I know proposals are like the way nonfiction is, acquired and published. I've read for my coworkers many nonfiction proposals, and those definitely get into the marketing and the trends and the reason this book is timely and important. So, this is obviously under the assumption we're talking not fiction here.
Right,
And
exactly.
I think in this we can kind of assume that, but there, I mean, we give away Edgar's for nonfiction. So if you're here under that, um, with that in mind, then you definitely want to be thinking about a proposal. And you're going to be looking at different agents then who are going to be really good at putting proposals together with you. So it
And
all
it's
depends.
not just then about marketing. The proposal there is a whole different, I mean, the word propose, see, it depends what you're asking. A proposal in that case would mean, the reason why nonfiction can sell on spec is because if it's nonfiction, you're not changing the ending. It's not like you're reading a fiction book and you're like, "Oh, I liked it," but then you fell off a cliff or did something crazy or killed the baby and, "Oh, I don't want to work with that author," right? So nonfiction it is what it is, right? So that's normally, here's an outline of what I want to write about. Here's a sample two of my chapters because it's my voice. Either you like my voice or you don't. And then here's my marketing and here's ideas of why I think this book is important, right? But that's an entire big proposal in lieu of a full manuscript because since it's nonfiction, it just is what it is. Either you're interested in the story or you're not. You either like the voice or you don't, and then you try to think about why it would fit in a marketplace. So if it's that kind of proposal, that is dealing with nonfiction, but that's a whole different beast, right? Even if it is nonfiction in the thriller space, but or mystery suspense space. But if you're talking a proposal of marketing, you're doing a lot of spit and polish on something. I'd rather your manuscript get that spit and polish, right? And I'd rather you just let me know. And if we're working together, we're going to be speaking a lot, right? And you'll say to me, "Hey, by the way, I know that my company at their annual retreat is going to buy 100 books." Right. And I know that my friend's law firm has a party every year and they'll put my book in this. You can give me these ideas, but you don't have to worry about putting together right now, an entire, uh, you know, document or whatever, because right now we're just worried about making sure the book, reaches a certain bar.
So I'm going to say I knew that everyone here today would have lots of questions. You all have lots of questions. You're putting them in lots of different spaces. So private DMs and public conversations and the Q&A box. So I'm going to try to be pulling from a lot of different places in case everyone's like, is she making up these questions? They're just coming in from different areas. So I think we'll do a couple of pretty quick ones, or inviting a shorter answer, perhaps. Someone had asked about word count for debut authors. I'm thinking, I think, Liza, you mentioned 150 words as, yes, exactly what your face just did, as something you might not look at. How important is word count? Is it something you look at? Is it something that you should always put in the query letter or not?
I'm okay if it's in the query letter, but I don't want a long, lengthy discussion about it. I personally like shorter books because I like a quicker read, especially as a debut. I look for anything from 70 to 90-ish. 60 starts to get a little shy, and 100 to me, since I know there's going to be editing, is a little bit heavy. Not that a book won't end there, but that's just my own personal taste. Obviously, I have books that are shorter, and I've had books that are longer, but that's kind of the sweet spot for me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's
Oops, sorry. Yeah,
a
please.
little different being on the editing side. Like if I was an agent, I would definitely want word count kind of expressed because you're just getting so many more like so much that it's important to kind of know that right off the bat. Anything coming to me, like I only accept agented submissions. So if it's coming into me, someone signed off on it, an agent has chosen to represent it. I'm assuming it's not going to be like this bloated 150,000 word book. And if it is, they're going to address that in a way that explains why. Because I've certainly gotten submissions at that length. But unless it's like on the short side or on the long side, I don't need to know personally. Because we're going to edit it down or add to it. We're going to change it anyway. And even like the book you held up that you have right now for me, like that's short. That's like under 60,000 words, I'm pretty
Yes,
sure. It's a
very
tight little
short.
book.
Yes.
I think it was submitted
Yep.
to me as a novella, and I said, no, we're not calling it that, but we're going to publish it. And so, yeah, word count doesn't bother. Like, I'm not that stressed about it.
So speaking of Joe, we had a question, a private question about Joe asking if you only accept query letters if it comes from an agent, and that Liza is directly from the agent. And I just want to say, as we continue to go through this conversation, that everything in publishing is a contextual answer. So it often depends on who your publisher is, what the process is, what your particular platform or other things. So I think there are overall answers about guidance, and then there's always particulars in regards to each situation. So, but maybe Liza or Joe, you could talk about, where the agent often is, but not always in the process, and where the editor might be.
So about, well, you're asking if they always need to be agented?
I think that's, yeah, like where is an agent the person you would be writing a query letter to? What if you were submitting
Yes,
directly
I
to
think
a,
the agent is your, yeah. I mean, most editors don't go through an agent, and honestly, I mean, don't take do not accept queries from unagented people. But that also happened over the years. It didn't used to be that way. But with all these legalities and other things that have come to fruition, they have found that they are more protected, both the agent, I mean, both the author and the editor by having kind of a third party in the middle, right? So an agent really would be your line of first defense. It doesn't mean you can't meet Joe at Thriller Fest, for example, and he says, oh my gosh, this sounds amazing. I want to see it. If I bring you acquisitions, I might need you to get an agent. I'm happy to take a sneak peek, but please go find an agent or whatever Joe decides to say. He could say, go to Liza and she'll be, no. But, you really should try to find an agent first. That is just again, bell-shaped curve we're talking about, right? There are outliers, but if you're looking for just standard advice, an agent is your first line of defense in this process.
Yeah, 100%. I very like almost never will read something that doesn't come from an agent. Um, I certainly get a lot that kind of, my emails out there or whatever, and people shoot their shot, and I don't fault them for trying, but for the most part, I'm not going to even respond. Like it's just not, I'm wherever you found my email address, I have written that it is not, I only accept agented. So but sometimes someone writes a good subject line and I'm like, well, I'll open the email, see what it is. And then like, it hasn't turned into anything. Please don't do that. But yeah, I think everything I've bought has been from an agent. You want an agent. They are your advocate, your protector, your person who will get you more money, the person who will secure you your deals and get you out internationally, hopefully, and hold your hand through the process. Because if you haven't done this before, it's like such a weird business, and it's really helpful to have someone on your side, like completely. Not that your editor isn't on your side and everyone is fighting for the same goal, but it's your agent's your ride or die, and you want a good one. So your query should be to them. They will then get it to a place that is good for your editor search, and then they will know what editors are looking for those types of books.
I'm gonna return to that actually, but first I'm gonna just pull up a few questions that I think have extremely I think the answers are going to be yes for all of them. So let's see. Um, should being a reader for an online magazine be mentioned in the query?
Yeah.
You don't have to say yes. You can say no if I'm totally wrong.
Yes, for me,
But yes.
yes,
So
yes.
yes, yes.
It just again, it shows you have an investment in this industry in some way. It's a positive.
Someone else mentioned they've had their manuscript reviewed by Kirkus with a positive review. Should I add that to my query?
Yes.
Excellent.
I don't
Sorry, go ahead, Joe.
I don't care about that.
Okay.
I want to know that it's out there. I want to know that it's already been submitted because that also changes sometimes, an editor then resending it if it's being published. So I do want to know if it's already been out there.
That's a good point. I actually care in a way that like I'm gonna Google it. I'm gonna Google this book. I'm gonna make sure. And like if I see it popping up, I guess it's good to own it. But I wouldn't recommend doing that.
Yes. That's a different
But
question. Yes,
yeah,
it's a different answer to a different question. There's no reason to have your book reviewed by Kirkus right now. It's not even edited. I mean, there's just, unless it's been self-published, unless it's been published, in which case, like Joe said, they're going to find, then, okay, that's great. But to say, hey, I already had Kirkus review it, it's backwards. You're just not, again, you're not researching, in my opinion, to know enough about the industry to really get how it works. You're just kind of hearing things and trying things, but it's really not it's not helping you as much as you think it is, and in some ways it could hurt. So I wouldn't do that
What
either.
about if you've worked with an independent editor? Would you want to know that? Would you want to hear any of their feedback in a query letter? This is actually just me asking the question. So
Yeah, I'd like to know this. If somebody says I've worked with so and so on this, I'd like to know. I know a lot of editors. If I think that they've worked with them, I might even speak to that editor and just out of curiosity, if I decide to read it in the first place. I think it's great. It just shows me again that you're looking to work to your craft, that it might need, work. But if you don't want to tell me that you've worked with an editor, I'm okay with that too.
okay, great. How beneficial is it to have awards you won listed in the query letter?
For what?
Awards that you've won.
Sure.
brag. You should brag. If you have awards, brag.
Yeah,
Excellent.
sure.
Uh, Linda had asked about, do you prefer a book series or potential for a series or a standalone? How would you like that to be presented, or how might a person present that in a query letter?
Please tell me this is a standalone. It stands on its own. There is potential for a second book. Do not come to me with this is a 4-book series and a 3-book series. And Joe is laughing, Joe is smiling because, you know, if the market doesn't bear book 1, there will not be a book 2. So let's just make sure book 1 is French Kiss and gets out the door and is a great book. And then we can worry about banging down your door for book 2. Doesn't mean an editor won't take a 2-book deal, but it doesn't automatically mean it's the second book in the series, right? So when people, and I will say this, and it's aging me, but I think, years ago, it's just a very different business, right? Growing up in this business, there were a lot of series, but it wasn't as crowded, and there were different kinds of bookstores, and you didn't have ebooks. I mean, most people don't know that ebooks were not even in contracts before 2011. The courts first came down then saying, this was not a contemplated right, and that's why all of a sudden you saw like, a Simon & Schuster author, all of a sudden 50 other books were at Random House, ebook or something because they bought the backlist. So it's just a different business now. I think you probably would find it hard, even since, I don't know, even 2019, 20, to name 20 authors that were debuts that now have like a book 4, 5, 6, 7. Joe, you could tell me if you don't agree with that. But I think maybe in a cozy space, but for the most part, what people are thinking about when they talk about like J.A. Jance has 1,000,000 books and J.D. Robb has 1,000,000 books and Patterson has 1,000,000 books and this one is, and Connolly has 1,000,000 books. I'm like, it's not like that right now, right? As a debut, you have to come in strong, come in hot, and really try to make that one book sparkle. And then you can worry about what comes next.
Agreed mostly. I think the general accepted like that I see all the time and I think is perfect and shouldn't change is like standalone with series potential. Like I get what I'm reading there. Like, if I like this world is lush and we can come back to it. Maybe it's the same character, maybe it's the same general setting, and we spin off like Tana French does and go to a different point of view. Um, any of that's fine with me. I've done straight series characters. I've done like these extended world series. I've done standalones every time. For me, if you envision this as a series, and that is something that's important to you, and you have four books plotted in your head, like please don't open, like as Liza said, don't start with saying you have four books. Like that doesn't help us really at in the early stages. We need to get through the first. But for me, it's very important that if we are going to get into business together, I'm likely going to do a multiple book deal. I'm likely going to want to sign up more than one up front, just because contracts negotiating kind of stinks, and I'd like to not have to do it every year. And then it's very important you hit your deadlines for book two. Book ones are, book twos I think are the hardest books to write. Um, book one, you spend all your time polishing, all your time getting it ready. You've had everyone in the world read it. It's got through how many revisions, and there's never been a time crunch. And all of a sudden you have a time crunch. And ideally you're putting a book out every year, if not 18 months. And that's quick. And it sneaks up on you really fast. And so I've had a lot of authors who have written their debuts, done well with them. It's a series, but by the time book two comes out, you're starting to lose momentum because they struggle to get it out there. And the authors who I then re-sign to new deals, the books three and four, are the ones who really handled two well. So even if we're not calling it a series right out of the gate, don't let that stop you from envisioning it as a series and plotting out that book too and getting ahead of it. Because if everything goes well and you get that deal, even if it's for a one book deal, you want to be ready for the next one.
Let's take on
Agreed.
a couple of more query questions. Two stories with the main character from the novel I'm writing have been published. This Paula asks, how useful, and a third was just accepted. How useful is this for an editor or publisher or agent? I think it's something you would put in a query letter, but Liza, tell me if I'm wrong.
Wait, the query that you've been published before and that you just got a third book deal?
I think
No,
it's short
it's
stories.
short stories. So two
Oh
short
yeah, short
stories with a
stories.
character from a
Sure,
debut novel. Yeah.
sure. Have any kind of publication, anything that shows that you're in it, is great.
Agreed. Yeah, I think if you were published in some place that, especially if they publish mystery related stuff, I know it's hard to get into. Um, and I think a lot of story novels start as short stories in people's heads, and then they realize there's a lot of meat on the bone. So it's a positive. I would include it.
So sort of related to, if it's in the same space, and someone, Deborah had asked, my platform is more closely associated with true crime, but the genre of a previous book, a nonfiction book. Is that a good thing to know, to hear about, even though her current book is debut fiction, or their current book is debut fiction?
I would
What
argue that there are so many fiction books about true crime that you should be finding those as your comps. Um, is that the question, using these as comps?
I think not as comps, but in regards to platform. So, Liza, when you're talking about
Oh,
platform, like what
okay.
if your platform is like you're a chef who has made the most amazing lasagna in the world, and you've decided to write about, art theft in a debut novel? I don't write, if in the case I was a parent from that
Right.
example.
No, I think any writing that you're doing is good, right? Writing is good, right? If you're talking about, so that's always a plus to show that you've been writing. I have a footnote. My footnote is, if you've been doing all of one kind of writing and you're pivoting, I think for me, I want to know why you're pivoting and do you plan to stay there? Right? Like, I don't want someone I've done a million of these books, but oh, I just woke up one day and thought this was like such a great mystery. And I just, it unfolded in my head. And then I'm going back to my other day job, so to speak, because it is hard, right? It is really, really hard. And I think that I like my authors to kind of develop a little before they flop back and forth, because I think it's not as easy to build as people think. Now, again, outliers, but we're talking just in general. So absolutely tell me if you've been published before. The one thing I will also say, because a lot of people do refer to being published before, and it might be a very small house, and that's totally acceptable. But then I want to know what your sales are. I really do, because an editor's going to look at that. And if you've published like 6 books, like, oh, I've published 6 books with blank publisher, and all of them sold, 200 copies, then I want to know what you're not doing to get a little bit of better reach, or something that you haven't thought about. Instead of spreading it out to so many different books, have you been really nurturing that 1, 2, or 3 book to really try to get events, or to try to do sales, or to try to do something in marketing? That's really more important to me than I've published 6 books, right? Because if it's not showing that you're not learning anything, if you're not growing a little, then I just think, again, you may not be ready for me. That's me, though, as an agent. There are other agents who might say, oh, I love it because I can take you and do all these things. I just feel that at this point in our career, in our list, look, we're a small agency, we are a boutique, we're very hand-holding. And so to get that kind of one-on-one attention, I need somebody who's ready for it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to turn back. I know, Joe, you were saying that we could turn back to comps later on. So now the moment has come. Carla had asked, could you discuss how to identify comps? And I know that you were saying about the 2 kinds, the sales comps and I actually don't remember what you called it, but I thought of it as the fun comps.
Fun.
So
Yeah.
great. Can you talk, you described a little bit, but is there anything else you might want to direct
Yeah.
people in thinking about how to find those? And maybe, Liza, for how you like to see them presented in a query? Like, do you want them listed out? Do you, like, what does that look like?
So yeah, for finding them, I think there are like 2 ways I recommend, and these are talking about the more business comps, the recent books. Goodreads is really good here. There is a section on every book's page that's like readers also enjoyed, I think it's called. You can't
Mm,
buy that space. That is purely like algorithm derived reader trends on people who have read this book have also read these books. That's genuinely how it is. Now, there's some parsing out to do because there's a disproportionate amount of like NetGalley, Goodreads users who maybe you see all these books are from the same publisher. So like look carefully. But I think you can, if you go through and you just keep like opening each book into a new tab and just scrolling through all of them, you can start to like find a heat map and see which books are that you haven't even heard of them, but they're relatively new. It's an author who's broken out in the last 3 or 5 years. And oh, look, it's a modern set thriller. That's enough some of the time, right? Like um another way that I like to recommend is to go outside, get out of your home, go to a bookstore, ideally an indie, and go look at their mystery and thriller section. See which books are like on the table displays or are cover out that you haven't heard of. Not the Pattersons, not the Lee Childs, not the Karen Slaughters. Find the people who are new to you and see when the book was published. It's right in the front in the copyright page. And that is a good way to see, because to get from a query all the way to like an end display at a bookstore for your first book is a really hard path to do, right? So that book has succeeded. Um, and that means editors probably have heard of it, agents have heard of it. The sales team you'll eventually be trying to have sell your book will have heard of it. The bookstore will have heard of it. It's just, those are good ways to kind of find books. And if you're still looking for an agent, go to the back of that book. Everyone thanks their agent in their acknowledgments. And so you can then kind of figure out which of these agents are representing these relatively new books, because that seems like someone you'd want in your corner representing you. So those are my 2 ways. And I think that's how I have to come up with comps too, because a lot of the times we get submitted books, I buy them, they have some comps, but I need 5 comps for my sales team, right? And so I have to do my own research too. Um, and so that's how I do it.
I'm going to I'm going to do a couple of questions about rejections. Quickly, I just want to say that Joe is thanked in this book that I was holding for his unwavering support. So it's a very good sign when you see an agent thanked. If
Just
someone,
quickly on
oh,
that
sorry,
book,
please. Yeah.
just to close the comp, to go back to fun comps,
Mm-mm.
that book was submitted to me as The Sopranos meets 6 Feet Under, set in like 1980s Iowa.
Hmm.
And I wanted to read it, like just from that line. I was
Hmm.
about a hitman, like who's killed in like the first page. And I was like, okay, that's interesting, and ended up really loving it. But that was a successful fun comp, right? Those aren't even books, but I kind of understood right away what I was getting into with those two things. So that's how you can kind of use something like that to stand out.
Absolutely. I'm going to say it's on your galley copy as well, and it's the opening line, and it
Yeah.
immediately grabs people.
Right. Here's like
Um,
the thing we're all built. Like if you do a good job with your query, you're gonna get your like, and you have a really good copy, a really good tagline or comp or fun. Your agent's gonna use it to get you your editor. Your editor's gonna use it to get you
Mhm.
like approved by marketing and like embraced by sales. Then sales is gonna use it at the bookseller level, and it's gonna find its way all the way to the consumer. So query matters so much if you do it right and do it really well, because it's gonna just set up that book for its entire lifespan.
Thank you, Joe. I'm going to, again, we have about 10 minutes left, so I'm going to turn to a couple of rejection questions. Um, Liza, I think you had said that you receive 50 to 100 queries a day.
Day,
A day.
a
Um,
day.
how many do you think you're able to respond to?
So when I first started, I responded to every single one. And I would write things like, I'm really sorry, this isn't a good fit for us. And then I realized after I got death threats afterwards, in my book's greatest book ever, how dare you? And I realized, oh, okay. So my website actually says, if you don't hear from us within 2 weeks, then we've decided for whatever reason your book isn't a good fit for us, right? So I actually don't respond to unsolicited queries. So if I get 50 to 100 a day, I might delete all of them. I might wind up holding on to two or three and thinking about whether or not this is a book I want to see. Once I see a book, though, I will always respond. So if somebody winds up submitting their manuscript to me, they will always get a response from me.
So thinking of responses that people have gotten, an author had asked after the query, how do you interpret rejections when an agent, I'm assuming an agent mostly, but perhaps also an editor, writes that they enjoyed your book, but it doesn't fit their current list? Are there code words that mean your book sucks, but I don't want to tell you? Or the plot is good, but
No,
your writing is
no.
awful?
So I might actually, that's something I would. So there are times that I've read a book, right, that I do see it, and I might I might write back and say, listen, it just didn't fit our current list. What does that mean? You pitched it as something, sometimes pitches are very general, right? Suspense, psychological suspense, thriller, mystery, whatever, right? And then it winds up being something similar that you don't realize I already have on my list, right? Like I might have a suspense that because I thought it was a little different, but then when I read it, it kind of felt very similar to something I already have on my list. I'm a small agency. I can't have, books cannibalizing each other. So sometimes it's just really not a fit. Sometimes somebody might be polite and say it's not a fit, but a lot of times also I think one of the words that I use a lot, which I genuinely mean, is it feels too familiar. And what I mean by that is there's nothing about it that really stands out. Sometimes I even write this honestly, saying there was nothing really wrong with it, but there was nothing really that right with it. And I'm very honest about that because sometimes it's just a good book, but you need more than a good book right now. In the traditional space, again, there's so many other avenues, but if you're looking to get to Joe, right, it's got to have a little oomph. It needs a little bit of dazzle. And that doesn't mean your book is not good. It just means maybe it's not for Joe at this point in your career. So those aren't code words for bad. It's just a code word that it's just not going to make it in this really crowded marketplace at this particular time when someone like Joe just bought one or two books and maybe is only buying one more a year, right? You just can't be a good book. You need to be
Agreed. Yeah.
a great book.
Something that happened, like I get a lot of is like you publish this and it's, and you've done well with this. So this is similar. And I'm like, you just ended the conversation here because I have it already. And we're not a throw it at the wall and see what sticks house. We're a curated list house. And so if I have a book that checks these like tenets of the genre, I don't need another. So I have no, like, this could very well be a phenomenal book, but it's just like, I already have one I believe in. I don't have, it's not fair to the author I already have. It's not fair to you,
Exactly.
to do a book too similar to something I already have. And just in general, yeah, to talk about that sparkle or whatever, like for me to buy a book, I have to love it enough to read it 6 times, right? Like I have to love it enough to work on it for the next 2 years. I like and talk about it incessantly. And that's a high bar to pass, and it needs to be a high bar. I need to be picky. Um, because I'm lucky enough to be at a publisher that allows me to be picky. And so yeah, it's like I don't buy a lot. But what I do, like I will advocate for and like champion for a very long time. And so I like that model. I feel very genuine in how I get to like discuss plans with an author. Um, but some houses are going to do more of a like a volume sort of system, and that's a great place to be if you can be, one of the books that stands out and gets the attention because that's how those factories churn out the big bestsellers.
As a small agent, I can't, same thing, I can't cannibalize my own author. So you might need an agency that has like lots of different agents. So each agent might have their own, similar book, but I'm me, so I can I can only do, mine, because we are a very small agency. So in some ways that's good because it's specialized service, and in other ways it's not as good because you have to kind of fill a different quadrant. Like as Joe said, you can't just all, check the same buckets. So not a good fit for our current list means just that.
Absolutely. And we are only have an hour, so we are coming up upon our time. We're going to go through a couple more questions. I'm sorry I couldn't get to everyone's. Fred had asked, the comp should not be books you've had a hand in, and books that you've written or had a hand in would be your backlist. Yes, and then
You should not comp yourself to, if that's what that's asking. If it's asking if it should comp to like the agent's books, if it's truly a good comp and you're not just
Exactly.
sucking up
Right.
and trying to gain favor, then yeah, do that. But if it's you're forcing like a round peg into a square hole, I wouldn't do it.
Exactly.
I'm going to close with a round of shorter questions. But are there some resources that either of you would suggest, good ways, good things besides and in addition to all of the resources from Mystery Writers of America, which everyone should check out by going to the website and becoming a member if you're not already? I'm assuming everyone here is, but you can see all of those resources online. But are there resources that either of you would particularly recommend? And Joe, you're on manuscript wish list. Is that something people should take a look at? On the agent side, you've suggested some of these things already, going to a store, seeing who's thanked, etc. But are there some that you want to just highlight again?
Yeah, I would say manuscript wish list is a good resource. I know agents really do, some really keep that go, like keep it updated and really update what they're looking for. At the very least, it's good to kind of see what people are asking for, because sometimes you might realize like, oh, I've written that, but I haven't been talking about it this way. And that might clue you in as to how to like reshape your query. I also think like there's an industry newsletter called like Publisher's Lunch. It shows new deals every day. I think it helps you learn the language of how people pitch books and like and it tells you which agents have made those deals. So that's a way to like, you can really dig deep into searching a book, figuring out who the agent is, what editors bought it. I think that's a good resource. And then for just general how to be an author sort of stuff, I think BookBub has a nice like for authors section on their site. And then I know this is MWA, but I think ITW and the International Thriller Writers is a good organization as well. Sisters in Crime, Crime Writers of Color, a lot of good organizations out there.
Just going to add, and Katie, since we don't have time, I can send it to you if you want to send it to them. But there's something called the AALA, right, which is about the agents representative group, and they have a section called, find an agent, and you can look instead of alphabetically by name, you can also look up by genre, so you could see who's looking for certain things. I think that's a great way. I send a lot of people where I say it's not a good fit for me, but here's the link to the AALA. They're kind of vetted agents. There might be someone here great for you. So I'm happy to send that to you, Katie, that you can send another time because I was trying to find it while we were talking and I couldn't
I,
multitask.
I just put it in the chat, so it's there, but we can include it when this conversation has been recorded, so it will go up later.
So the
So we can
ALA, yeah.
include
And
that,
then
yep,
I
in BookBub
personally,
as well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't have a wish list because I actually also like just being surprised. Sometimes I don't know that I'll like something. So I try, but it's different. Joe's at a house that has also their own style. I could, if it's not right for Joe's house, it might be right for someone else's house. So I have a little bit of kind of flexibility in what I like. Um, so that wasn't helpful at all.
Oh, no, it was. It's great to know about AAL, the agent site, which is not one that I personally knew about. So it's great to share that. And just a reminder too, there's a lot of resources on MWA's website. So I'm gonna just close up, and I'm gonna close with a couple of questions for both of you, short answers. And I just wanted to wish everyone happy Lunar New Year. Ramadan Mubarak, first day of Ramadan today. It's also Ash Wednesday. There's a lot of things coalescing in this week. So I'm just thinking of everyone who's celebrating or honoring those particular days. I reposted the Edgar Award. So if you all need, in addition to the many great things that you shared in the chat, if you need more reading recommendations, there's a lot of fantastic finalists there. And I wanted to end with these four questions. What is your top tip for a query letter?
Read it back to yourself without like with the idea that you aren't the writer of it and think if you would genuinely be excited about what you are pitching and saying. Try to like separate yourself from it and read it cold. Would this be something that excites you? Because that is what the whole point of this is to get that email opened.
I would say be honest.
I love both of those. And how about the flip side of that? What is one thing that you just would beg people never to do? If there is one thing.
Unrealistic comps telling me you wrote the next Gone Girl. Again, just you've already like deflated the balloon.
Being unprofessional at this state, I don't mind sarcasm and I don't mind people who can have a sense of humor. But when I get, hey, so I wrote a book and figured, what the heck? I may as well query you. Again, that might be how we would talk and over a beer, but it's you're querying me. So if you don't have your query hat on, if you're not being professional, it's just again, I don't recommend it.
What's what example, if it comes to mind, of a query letter that you either didn't expect to love, or just came in too fresh and just can't? If someone were to ask you, what's the best query letter you've read? What is one that comes to mind?
I published a book a couple of years ago called Holy City by Henry Wise. It actually won the Edgar last year
Yes.
for debut novel. That query was
There, that was great.
near perfect, and it came in with not only like a very clear understanding of the book it was trying to be and its comps. It had blurbs too, which is something we haven't talked about, but that was really successful. It had like S.A. Cosby and Ace Atkins and Megan Abbott like already endorsing this book, which showed not only this read kind of vouched for by people who I trust, but it also showed that he, despite being a debut author, had the ability to break into this tough industry, and it kind of did what we've all been talking about. And so that was a really good letter that, I went into that book wanting to like it. And I think that's, if you're getting that reader in that headspace, you're winning, because I'm looking for a reason to say no.
Same thing. I had a debut who came to me with a huge platform because she'd been working on her craft. She's been meeting people. She came in with blurbs from Bob Dugoni and Lynn Constantine. And it was just somebody who checked all the boxes, knew exactly what she was doing. And I'm like, you're ready for an agent. I really hope I love this book. And I did. And I sold it.
That's
So
fantastic. And I wanted to close with one book that you would recommend everyone pre-order.
reorder.
One that
Oh,
you worked on in some way would be good. And Joe, you don't have to say this one because I've already, that will be my
Yeah, I'm gonna
suggestion.
double
But
dip and say a different book. Coming out in a few weeks, so it'll be here soon if you want to pre-order it. It's called Ruby Falls by Gin Phillips. It's a murder mystery set entirely underground, in the during the Great Depression in these place called Ruby Falls in Tennessee. Bunch of people go underground, and one of them's not going to make it back above.
that would be a great opening to a query letter, by the way.
And I'm pretty sure that's how it was pitched.
Excellent. And
Yeah.
Liza, how about you?
I have to think about a pre-order. I was trying to think about a book. One of our books just hit USA Today for 2 weeks, so I was going to talk about that
Oh,
one. But since it has
you
to be
can
a
talk about
pre-order,
that one. You did
We
mention
were
that one
never
too.
friends by Kara Voda. But if we need to talk about a pre-order, I would say we have a new book coming out by Robert Bailey, who is a legal thriller author. This is his first book to a new series called The Mediator, and it is his first female main protagonist. And instead of being a lawyer, he is writing about a mediator. Which is a really interesting, again, when I say, a new way into tried and true, there's a lot of legal stuff out there, but there's nothing really with the mediator. So I think it's going to be a very interesting twist on the genre, or I should say in the legal thriller field. So I would say The Mediator by Robert Bailey.
Fantastic. Where I've shared his website. I shared the link for Ruby Falls. Got some other links in
Gosh,
the
you found it
chat.
so quickly.
You're so
You're
quick.
amazing.
I have a very small skill set. Finding links while talking is one
So
thing.
impressed. I just saw it. I'm like, oh my goodness. Wow.
Well, there's been a
Okay.
lot
Thank
shared in the
you.
chat, so we'll try to share those out. And again, the recording will be up soon. Um, Definitely recommend everyone check out the Edgar Award nominees, finalists for this year. And I loved all of your advice, like summing up sort of in your query letter, be honest, be excited, and hopefully you'll find that perfect match with your agent and editor. So thank you both so much for your expertise and all the information you shared tonight. And
Thank you
thanks
for having
everyone for
us.
being here.
Yeah, this was fun. Thanks for having us. Thanks, Katie. This was
Thank
good.
you.
All right, goodbye.